It looks like Enzo Maresca could be planning for what looks to be the next tactical evolution in European football.
Let's get into the tactics. So, on paper, we sort of set up, you could call it a 4-3-3 like this. You could still call it a 4-2-3-1 like this if you wanted Enzo as the 10. Off the ball is pressing in more like this, more of a 4-1-4-1, which sort of, again, like as it got deeper, it would then become actually more of a 4-4-2 with Enzo sort of playing left mid, Neto and Delap sort of like this in a 4-4-2 as it got deeper. But to begin with, it was sort of a little bit more like a 4-1-4-1 that we're used to seeing with James and Enzo in those central positions to press centrally, Casado in the 6, and then obviously Neto and Palmer on the wings. So with those two on the wings, obviously a lot of the questions being answered in this video and in this sort of section. Palmer on the right, Reece in the middle, Neto's different / new role, and the build-up structure, not including an inverted fullback, so the back four. Let's go and quickly have a little look. Can you guys see that? Let me know. Can you guys see that? Because the whole point of this system and what I think they're trying to do, and what Maresca's, he's even said himself, he's trying to experiment a little bit for next season. Now, one thing I want to put out there, this is not something that I think we see every single game. This is not like a new system where I think we line up with it every single game. I think it's something that Maresca's trying to add a different dynamic to the team. So as you can see, you've got the 4. You've technically got the 4 in the middle here with Cucurella and Gusto both pushed up even further than the double pivot. You've got the 3, the back 3, with the 2 split centre-backs and Sanchez in the middle. So you've got that to form the build-up. Again, you're outnumbering that front 2 if they push on to press you. Got the 2 in the pivot. Again, they can be man-marked. But again, if only one goes, then they've still got that 2v1 advantage in the middle. And then you're providing width. Rather than providing width high up the pitch, you're providing it a little bit deeper. And Gusto and Cucurella can provide the width deeper to be an option to pass out from the back, building in a back 4 rather than a back 3. But then they can also push forwards to provide the width going forwards. And that is why it got interesting as we pushed higher up the pitch. Because if we go into this image, you then see Enzo and Palmer, who's the right winger, who was fixing himself in field from the get-go. It wasn't sort of like what we saw a little bit more last season where he was pinned out on the right and he would drift. This is under Pochettino, I'm going to say last season, by the way, where he'd start on the actual right wing and he would come inside as Gusto overlapped. And there was a little bit of a dynamic there. What you can see here is Palmer, even in the first phase of build-up, he's in that pocket. He's already allocated himself within that pocket. Same with Enzo, who's playing in the 10s. That's normal. So you've still got those double sort of half-space pocket players. The difference is now is because these two are providing depth, width deeper, further up the pitch, you're not going to have the width. But this is where it's interesting because, of course, we know that these guys can push on and provide that width. But with these two players, what's so intriguing to me with Neto and Delap playing as these split forwards, which I think is something we're seeing a lot more now with Marmoush at Manchester City. And it's a way of sort of, again, you've got Rafinha is another one that does it. Adding this dynamic to your team, especially against teams that are going to press you man for man, gives you the chance to create these sort of artificial transitions. Now, in this scenario, it is actually a 2v3. But what you've got here with their fullback is if he was to press outward, if they're pressing aggressively and say they don't want Cucurella or Gusto to receive the ball, and they're pressing man for man in those areas with the fullbacks both jumped up, what you're going to get is a 2v2 with Delap and Neto or whoever the personnel is. Be more direct. So especially against those teams that are going to press you man for man, you've now got the opportunity to, instead of having to play out from the back, now you've got the opportunity to play out from the back because you've got the back 4, you've got the width that is deeper, you've got the double pivot still intact, you've got the 2 half space players. But if you go direct, you've got Delap who can spin into the channel. You've got Neto who can spin into the channel. You've got one who can come deeper to receive the ball and turn and try and play the other one through. And you create these little 2v2 artificial counterattacks. Like I say, this isn't a 2v2, but it's what it creates in sort of hypothetically. Now, what is brilliant about this is that, of course, it can also bring in somebody like Nicholas Jackson. You can have Nicholas Jackson and Liam Delap playing together. Now, the main thing for me is these two spaces behind it. And I think how we sort of suffered in this system, which is what we're going to get into now as to why it didn't really work as effectively as it could, is the tempo that we played at. We played so quick. And I think because it was almost, let's play this way, it felt like we did it at every given opportunity. Let's go long. Let's go long into those two players. Let's try and hit those channels and let's do that. But by doing it every single time and by not slowing the game down at all, the fullbacks were often out of position, which left these huge spaces behind them, which then meant one of Caicedo or Reece had to cover in those areas, and our rest defence was never set. So our counter press was really poor in this game. Our ability to take control of the game was awful, and that was the knock-on effect of trying to play this system. And I think the fact that, like I say, would usually say when I think with this team, because it's so young, if you tell them something, I think a lot of them want to do it instantly. They want to keep doing it and they want to sort of impress straight away and they want to sort of enact that system straight away. Whereas I think it's something, that's why I sort of said this season the details need to come a little bit slower. Like last season, I understood why there was less coaching details and why we was quite fixed, because I think that it was more about being simple and getting an understanding in the team. Now this season, I think we're going to experiment a bit more. Let's go back to the tactics board and let's speak about why those positions. Let's go to the on-ball shape that we was just talking about. So Neto infield. And this is the first phase of build-up. Now, when we got higher up the pitch, Neto would drift back over to the left and get on the ball a little bit more out there. But let's go back into this sort of area and how we sort of saw it here, because it was sort of like this. Now, let's say these two players push forward. Now, what I mean by the tempo, if we are keeping this ball and we're slowly building up, and these are a little bit deeper, and as we build slowly, let's say we hit these areas by the time these players are here, but because we've moved up as a unit, these players are now slightly higher. These players are now positioned here, so that if we lose the ball, there's now less space unless it goes really long in behind and they put a chase on. And that has to be a pin perfect ball because it's not easy to sort of make and weight that ball perfectly at that distance. You've now got players that are in closer proximity, like these gaps. Again, the centre-back ones are a little bit bigger, but you've got these two here. You've got these gaps here are smaller, as you can see. However, what we did way too much, like I say, when we was trying to sort of do this and try to implement this more direct system, is we would go through, either through into here or even just long into the channel way too quickly. We'd have Gusto bombing forward. We'd have Palmer bombing like forward or sort of in that zone. We'd have Delap trying to spin into that channel, and that would be the same on either side of the pitch. So then if their player was then to get the ball back, it was quite easy to find one pass through into these spaces that we just spoke about, here and here. Because let's say Kukurea, if it was on the other side, he's pushed up. And that's where you fall into the trap of now your rest defence isn't set. It's not higher. They're not high in there to sort of stop that quickly. They're instead a little bit further back. These two are a little bit further back. And it's going to mean that there's a knock-on effect through the team. James is going to have to come out to here if it's on the right side of the pitch, or Caicedo into here. And once James comes into here, Caicedo is now isolated in the middle of the pitch as well. He's got no help, which means if they get past James, you're now against three. And it just has the knock-on effect of where you can then start to find Chalobah jumping out of position, Caicedo having to run back and sort of defending these bigger zones here. Same with Colwill. Again, if he jumps out, Caicedo having to... And we saw it quite a few times. Both defenders jump out, and Caicedo is actually the one defending deepest to try and sort of mop things up. So the system itself can work, but there's obviously quite a few details, and I think the pacing of it is a massive one to ensure that the counter press isn't ineffective. Now, that's not to say that you can't go direct straight from here into the channel on one or two occasions, but I think that we didn't switch it up enough, because I think that what we then did is we ran ourselves into the ground. We made it a bit of a back and forth game, which suited Flamengo more with those bigger spaces in the channels. And I think they managed to hurt us by doing so.
Let me know your thoughts about this tactic that Enzo Maresca used and whether you want to see it again.